we got the exhaust leak fixed, but we still have our engine miss. Now once again, in our effort to poke in the sand trying to find out the different problems, Tony was actually leaning over the engine like this when we were listening for the exhaust noise, and he got zapped. I'm sure you know what that means. Something actually just zapped him. We got an electronic spark. It hit his arm there and just basically got one of those zaps that just goes through your whole body. So now we're looking for what's the cause of that. How did he get zapped? As you can see here, he's leaning right over the top of the distributor cap. So we're sitting here thinking something's leaking there, and we know we got a misfire. So we're looking all over the place with our eyes and didn't see anything. But here's a way that you can kind of discover that. You take just like a screwdriver and run a wire down to where it's grounded. Now if you take that screwdriver and just go over the wires, right there you can see we've got a spot on that wire that's leaking, so we've got a bad spark plug wire. Now just to enhance this so that you can see it better, we've actually sprayed it down with water like many times do, and you can see that spark is just jumping right out of that spark plug. Now that was bad enough for Tony to get zapped, but again, it was poking in the sand. It's not the buried treasure. It is something that needs to be fixed, but it is not causing our main problem. Now you remember we had a code P1105, which indicates that there's a map barrel type problem. We looked that code up in the troubleshooter, and it clearly says down there that one of the most common problems with this is that pintle sticks in the solenoid. So we went down to look at the solenoid. So we came down to the map barrel solenoid sensor down here, and we happened to be looking around and we saw that these didn't look right. They actually looked like they're backwards. We looked at the map voltage on the scanner and we saw that it was reading 27 inches, which is not right. So we actually pulled these out and switched them to the way they're supposed to be. Probably somebody else was doing this in here, put them back wrong. They should just be actually running straight and not crisscrossing. Now we looked at our scanner and the inches of mercury was reading about 9, which is a normal reading. But even switching this, it didn't fix our problem. So this is not the buried treasure. It's another thing we had to fix, but we're still looking for the big problem. Setting there at idle, it would actually run smooth. But when we'd raise it off idle just a little bit, that's when we would start getting our miss. So you see, taking this approach, we knew we had a big problem. The engine was backfiring and running real bad and just had to be a serious problem. To me, it felt like a direct ignition problem. What else can cause a direct ignition problem? Now, it's a clear indication here that the distributor is a common problem here, and that might be our buried treasure. So we actually looked through all data and we saw that inside the distributor is the built-in cam sensor. So we're going to test the cam sensor and see if that happens to be a problem. Now to test the cam signal, when you look at your wiring diagram, you see that you need to be on the purple and the light green wire. So we're actually back probed in there because it does need to be connected, because we're going to do a live test. So you don't disconnect it, you leave it connected and back probe it. Now we take our wires back over here, and this wire is actually tapped into the distributor. We're plugging it here on a little plastic clip, and then we're hooking our alligator clip to that. The same thing with the other wire. Now both of these are going to go up to our lab scope. Now when you're using a 4-channel lab scope, you know on top you have your yellow, green, blue, and red, the 4 different channels, and the grounds over here are the common. So you can actually look at all 4 like this. Or you can actually turn them off if you go over to your traces. For example, I can pick the 3rd trace, which is the blue one, and take it off of displayed. and it erases the blue when you can't see it. Another way I like to go is when you're only going to be using 2 leads, is just go up to your view, and instead of 1 window, put in 2 windows. Now it's going to separate. You've got the yellow trace up here, and you've got the green trace down here. You can also go to 3 windows if you want to look at just 3 signals and separate them. I'm going to go back to the 2 window trace. And then the next thing is to start the engine. Now you can see the yellow is on top and the green. And we've got 2 different windows. Now one note here, we're on 10 milliseconds. Both of these windows will only be on 10 milliseconds. If I want to change my sweep to say 100 milliseconds, that's the whole sweep across the screen. So now we're at 100 milliseconds, and both are going to be reflecting 100 milliseconds. 10 milliseconds is a very good place to start on most issues. Now one thing you can do on the traces though, if I want to go and pick trace 1, which is the yellow, I can change that to say 50 volts. So the yellow trace is at 50 volts, but my green trace is still at 20. Trace 2 is still at 20. And I could change that to 50 as well. So the point is here is you cannot change the sweep between the 2, but you can change your voltage ranges. I'm going to put them all back to 20. And we're both back showing 20 volts, and these are off. And I'm going to go over here to the Internet Explorer and look at all data. And I want to find the camshaft, so I'm going to hit my keyboard button and type in camshaft and hit go. Camshaft position sensor. I want to get the description of the operation over here. Tells about the camshaft. Now as you scroll down the information here, it'll tell you about the cam sensor. It'll also tell you right here, the distributor is not repairable and must be replaced as an assembly. If you go up here and look at this, let's open that up a little bit. Now again, looking at this big opening right here is cylinder number 1. If we go to our firing order, I'm going to go back into all data over here. And you can see in this vehicle is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the firing order. And it's counterclockwise. So when we go back to this diagram, this is cylinder number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now if you happen to have a vehicle that had a different firing order, it could be 1, 3, 4, 2, or whatever the firing order might be. Now here's the distributor with the distributor cap off. To see the rotator ring, you need to take the rotor off, but notice that it's held on with a screw back here. Once you remove that screw, you can take the rotor off, and then there's 2 screws that hold this cap on. You can take this off, and then you can see the rotor ring underneath it. When you look at that really close, you can see on the outer ring there's little cuts in it, and there's 360 of them. Each one is 1 degree. Now this bigger square is the point to indicate cylinder number 1, and it rotates counterclockwise so that you can see that it is going to turn that way, and then each one of those is a new cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now underneath this black square here is the light emitting diode. So it shines a light in there, and that light goes through those little holes, and it counts it as it goes by. So I'm going to go away from back here and go back into my Verus, go back into my scope meter, and you can see I'm still running. If I need some more information, I can go back to my component test and get whatever information I need to find out more details. setting there at idle, it would actually run smooth. So when we'd raise it off idle just a little bit, that's when we would start getting our miss. Now we think we found our buried treasure. It's clear that the cam sensor inside the distributor is bad, so what we're going to do now is change the distributor and then retest everything to confirm it. So we got the new distributor in. Let's look at the lab scope. Now once you have a distributor that's working correctly, this should be your pattern. We're on a 10 millisecond sweep and we'll rev it up. And you have a nice square wave on all the points.